Before we go on, a quick digression on the subject of join elimination. You are familiar, I think, already from the previous topic about the idea of like, okay, can we count on the user to supply an optimal SQL query? And the answer is no. And one of the things a database server can try to do is to skip work that it determines is unnecessary. And the optimizer can obviously only do this if it's certain that the outcome will not be affected by doing the join. And there is a certain amount of, it's painful to have to do this, right? So, why do we have to do it at all? Can we just ask the developers who wrote the SQL query to do it better so it doesn't have a join statement in it when one is not necessary? I mean, that would be nice, but, would you also like a pony? Or as Freddie Mercury would say, I want it all and I want it now. Okay. The other thing to keep in mind is that the compiler doesn't do this, right? If you ask for some operation, the compiler knows it can replace what you asked for transparently with an equivalent but faster operation. It just does that. It doesn't hassle you and say, you were wrong to submit the request this way. It's happy to do the thing for you, and it doesn't get mad. So, you're welcome. Okay. So join elimination, something like this. If we have select something from customer, joining address, linking by the address, as presented, we can't actually eliminate the join. What's up with that? This is like a real SQL query, and the join will only be removed if we can prove that it's not needed. But in this case, we don't know that. Because the join will only return results where there is an associated address for the customer. So if a customer for some reason doesn't have an address, they don't appear in the results. And if that's the case, then the answers are different if the join is present versus if the join is not. Well, how would we know that? How would we make sure that there is a matching row? Well, the answer is constraints. And database constraints exist for a reason. A number of FYDP groups every year try to pitch to me, and some of them often say something like, "Oh, they want to use NoSQL because it's faster." And yes, technically correct. It can be faster than using a typical SQL database, but that doesn't mean necessarily it's the right thing for your use case. Sometimes the constraints and things which seem annoying are there, so you have things like data integrity, which typically you want. I mean, you don't have to, but typically you want. Auditors get mad if your data doesn't add up. The amount invoiced doesn't correspond to the amount that you were expecting to invoice. That tends to be a problem, but you can try to explain it to the auditors. I don't want to. But if we have a foreign key defined, this is a constraint that says there has to be a matching element in a different table or relation. That kind of thing actually really helps us to identify these situations. Because if we can't identify it, then, well, we know that the join condition is not useful, because if we know that every customer must have an associated address, then we don't need the join in this case. And then we just get a select star from customer, and that's fast because it is a select without conditions, and we never have to look at the address table at all. And so, the foreign key constraint and the not null constraint are what enable elimination. So not only does adding a constraint help enforce the correctness of your data, but it can also improve the performance of your query. So that's pretty cool. The other thing is, outer join constraints can be removed as well. Outer join says I want to join all things in these two tables, even if there isn't a matching row in the other table. I would just fill it in with nulls if you needed. And if that's the case, all the tuples are fetched from the customer, whether or not there's an address. So this left outer join thing serves no real purpose. And can we get rid of it? If we remove both constraints, both the not null constraint, the unique constraint, the foreign key constraint, then yeah, we would actually have to do the join to make sure that every customer does in fact have an address. Given a more complex query, it does get increasingly difficult to determine whether or not a particular join may be eliminated. And as I said, the same queries that are written on a database in which constraints have not been added are not eligible for the join elimination optimization. But it is a good example of why constraints are valuable in the database. Another reason to consider adding this kind of information and structuring your data and structuring your system in such a way that we can know specifics can actually help unlock some optimization. Here's an analogy, maybe it helps. Your task is to find, by searching through the library, all copies of the book Harry Potter and the Pethread House Elves. This is a plausible task, right? And the database, much like the library, has some things that help you find what you're looking for more efficiently. That is to say that there are card catalogs, index, it tells you it's in this section, it's on this floor, and what have you. That's a plausible task. And if you're trying to find all the copies of the book, and you know that there is a rule, and the rule is strictly enforced, if an item does not appear on our records, it does not exist, then as soon as you found the single copy of this book, you can stop looking. You don't have to continue looking, because if there is only one, well then you've found it, and continuing to look is just wasting your time, right? So why would you continue doing that? Like just for thoroughness? Like that that's a little bit silly. So in reality you probably wouldn't. You would just stop at that point. And again, this is a similar sort of optimization. The rules let us skip doing unnecessary work, which is meaningful in terms of optimization.